it's like he's got these two chicks who are like rubbing on him and on his legs, and he's like sitting on this chair like it's a throne, and it becomes clear that he also sells drugs. And he pulls out a gun and is like talking and waving the gun around while these chicks are like at his legs. I mean, it was like I'm like, am I dreaming? Is this, what the fuck is going on?
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Forming in the suburbs of Atlanta while they were still in high school, Whippersnapper was originally called Corpus Spin. The band's 5 members, guitarists Mike and Jason, drummer Pat, vocalist Andy, and bassist Andy B, decided to adopt the current name fairly soon after the band's founding. Their first recording was a split 7-inch with Ronin. Soon they were hitting the ground running and touring with punk giants like Green Day, 88 Fingers Louie, and Blink-182. I had no idea that they played shows with Green Day. It's pretty fucking cool. Lobster Records issued their first 2 albums, America's Favorite Pastime, which was released in 1998 when the band members were all 19, and 1999's The Long Walk. The first album featured pretty standard East Bay influenced hardcore played with youthful energy, but by the time The Long Walk was issued, the band had moved to LA and soaked up enough new influences to produce a more adventurous album that played with rhythm and lyrics, resulting in a more creative product. Appearances wear thin. Whippersnapper's first for Fueled by Ramen appeared 3 years later. After the record was released, they broke up and broke Fueled by Ramen's hearts along with many of their fans' hearts. I just added that part there at the end. The rest of it was on Discogs. So thanks for the write-up, Discogs. My old band Lane Meyer went on a tour with them. I think it was like our 5th tour. We had only done 8 tours total. I think it was like the 5th or 6th tour. But Humble Beginnings had toured with those guys either a bunch of times or one time first. And then we got connected with them, so we went out on the road, played a bunch of shows, and we fell in love, and a love story ensued after that. You can still find their music on Spotify, and will soon be able to buy their albums again, fingers crossed, when Lobster Records reboots and gets their shit up and running online. So you'll have to just kind of just stay in touch somehow by just Googling it, or do a Google alert. Or just keep listening to this podcast, because I'll probably mention it as soon as Steve gets that record label up and running again. I reached out to Andy Munn and asked if he'd like to chat, because I haven't talked to him in literally 20 fucking years. And we tried to get Pat on the phone, but Pat's too busy being a pilot, which is pretty cool. And it was just me and Andy, but this interview is really fucking hilarious. Andy, I don't remember him being this funny back then. He was just a very like stoic dude. I remember just very dry, but goddamn, he is hilarious. His stories are so fucking funny. So you are in for a ride with this episode. But yeah, it's pretty fucking funny. You'll hear me laughing quite a bit. So I got him on the phone, or the Skype, and this is what we talked about. Jim Cherry, the propane heater in the van story. It's one of the stories where I lost it. The Jackie Brown story. Getting on Lobster Records, putting on a show for Blink-182 before they were huge, staying with weird-ass people, and a shit ton more. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment just to thank all the people who have bought some merch, and some people actually just sent like donations because they're like, I don't want a t-shirt, I'll just send you some money, which is cool because I'm just trying to sell these t-shirts for a colonoscopy that I'm getting, which should be happening right now today, meaning now, if you're listening to this at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, that I'm currently sedated and getting a camera up my ass to make sure everything checks out. So if you want to see what this is all about, last week's episode I talked about in the beginning, when my dad was 62, he died suddenly of colon cancer because he didn't get a colonoscopy. And apparently it's in my family history because his cousin had got it when she was 40, but she had gotten a colonoscopy and she survived. So that means that me being the age of 40, I need to start doing this shit now. And I went to a doctor a couple weeks ago. Something looked a little off, so he's like, you should go do this. So I've been kind of freaked out for, I'd say, the last 2 weeks. And so now I get to finally figure out what the fuck this is. A lot of people say it's probably nothing, but you never know. So again, thank you all the people that helped donate because I'm paying for this out of pocket. The procedure is only $1,250, but I don't have health insurance because I work for myself, and health insurance is quite expensive. It's, and $1,250 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you are working for yourself, you really don't know where the next paycheck is coming from or the next gig is coming from. So anyway, if you want to see what this is about, just go to thiswasthescene.com/colon and you can read about it there. I'm selling 3 shirts that help go to this, but I mean, if you buy any other merch, that also helps this. People have donated. I'm not asking for donations, but I think there should be a fair trade here. So if you want to buy a shirt, great. And thank you to Robert J. Heiner for this shirt saved Doyle's ass idea, which I think is fucking hilarious. And that's sold a few. So Rob, thanks. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. You get the gist of the podcast. I kind of just record everything. And
Oh yeah, I've listened to a bunch of it. I've tried to. I listened to Steve's and Vinny and Wendy's so far, and I started listening to part of the one with Smack and Isaiah because I loved Wilhelm Scream and those guys, and was a cool fucking guy. And we had some good shows with them. Really loved it. I thought they were a great band. So started to listen to that one, but got distracted and had to turn it off. The crazy thing for me on listening to Wendy's is that it brought back a lot of memories because, as you probably know, there was a lot of intersection between Whippersnapper and Strung Out. We did a bunch of tours with them.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Oh, we did a ton of tour. I mean, our first major tour was Europe with Strung Out. And then, the reason, and we actually met them in California. The first time we went to California, we were doing a show for Lobster, who was interested, and also for Bob Becker at Fearless Records. And Bob completely fumbled on the show that he was supposed to put together for us. It was just terrible. Like, we ended up at some Mexican restaurant with nobody there. And so he's like, come back in a couple of days. I'm going to do this thing, and Strung Out's going to be there, and Bigwig, and you're going to love it. And you guys you'd love to meet those guys, and then it'd be a real thing. And Volcom is involved. I don't know if it was Volcom or who was at the time. Some skate company or somebody was involved. And so we said, okay, great. And then we ended up canceling our San Francisco show and going back down there and playing at this outdoor thing with Strung Out, and Bigwig, I think, was also on it, and a couple of other people. I'm trying, the White Caps maybe. And because it was on Fearless, and it was really great. Of course, it started sort of a tradition of ours of canceling in San Francisco, which pissed off the people in San Francisco a bunch of times. We canceled San Fran like 3 times. So
that happens.
Yeah, it happens, and it got back to us a little bit here and there. But that's the first time we met them, and then after we got on Lobster, we did a tour with them in Europe when Jim was still with the band. And Jim was a scary motherfucker.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what was he like?
Well, the funny thing is, when we first met him, he was a scary motherfucker. We were like 18 years old.
Well, everyone listening, too, he's talking about Jim Cherry, just so
yeah.
people are like, who the fuck is talking about? Okay, so go on.
Yeah, so Jim Cherry, we get to Europe. The way that this was working out was Strung Out was on tour in Europe with someone else, probably No Effects or somebody. And then they were going to do a string of dates on their own to bridge over to something else, and they needed somebody in support. And by that, I mean, we had to pay part of all of the expenses on the tour, which led to an issue, frankly, because we were brand new and we sold as much as we could, but we were a little short at the end, so we had to figure out a way to get it set up. But we went out with them, and it was the first real tour that wasn't us going around the region or just in our van somewhere. We were on a bus with Strung Out. And we got there, and we were late the first show because the Dutch customs people wanted to keep all our stuff. Like, they basically wouldn't let us bring our equipment through because they thought we were going to sell it or something. And so me and Jason Joseph are like in a little room with this custom guy that keeps coming in and saying, basically shaking us down for money, which we paid him as much as we could. We're like, hey, this is all we got, man.
Wow.
We're like a punk band. We have no money. So here's a couple $100 for whatever fine you're trying to do, and our taxes. Believe me, we'll check it back in when we come back through. This is our livelihood. We're not selling this stuff. So we meet up with Jim, and Jim was just and the band, and Jim was pretty much like, you guys better be fucking awesome. Right? Basically, you better get out there and fucking melt faces tonight. Give us that kind of shit. And basically, apparently, the way you're supposed to do this, we didn't know because we'd never done the international tour. And I don't think you could even do it this way today, was you just charge the plane with your stuff. You go up to the counter, you check in all of your stuff. And if there's fees, there's fees. But usually at the time there wasn't fees. This is a totally different world,
Yeah.
Pre-9/11, everything. So, but the thing is, over the course of the tour, Jim became one of the coolest guys. He was a teddy bear by the end.
Yeah.
But he get let off this like really tough guy. And at the time, I guess they hadn't put out. It was Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues was still their record. They hadn't put out the new record yet.
Yeah.
and Ultimate Devotion, all that stuff she talked about. That wasn't yet.
Yeah.
And then later we toured with them in the U.S. and Canada. We did a bunch of stuff with them. And we looked up to them a lot. I mean, they were like, to us, the kind of thing that we were doing, because they kind of mixed metal a little bit with the punk rock stuff, melodic punk stuff. And like one of our goals, although we never really got there, was sort of, the Beach Boys playing metal, right? Like that was the kind of a riff that we talked about.
Yeah, because you guys had a lot of
vocals.
harmonies. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of harmonies, lots of vocals, but fast. It changed a little bit because, the scene changed and emo influence, a lot of things happened. But, at first it was like we were pretty influenced by the original iteration of the group was really influenced by metal. We all love that shit. I mean, I think when my first sort of punk groups were the Descendants, and then a bunch of thrash metal bands like DRI, Mm-hmm. So Ben and I met, when we were like kids. We started playing when we were like 13 years old.
Wait, hold on. We're gonna jump into that yet because I want to get you there. But I do want to say, for first question, did you melt their faces off like you wanted?
Well,
to?
hell yeah. Okay. We did with the best we could. I mean, we were going nuts. I mean, obviously we had a lot of energy. We were 18 years old. We're in Europe for the first time, and it was hilarious. I mean, we it was an amazing experience. We did have a big crowds for Strung Out, and at least at the time it was relatively big crowds, and it was fun. We meet all these European kids, and they were all a little bit crazy. I think the first interaction with the European fans was these girls telling us that we had those like athletic Kool-Aid socks, what I'm talking about, with like the stripes at the top.
Yep.
And basically I don't know if I guess it was Dutch because it was the first show. Basically told me and Jason, not sexy. She doesn't know any English except for not sexy, which she tells us pretty clearly. So I think we threw all those socks out immediately afterwards. Because it was kind of cool thing at the time to have it was like a look, in the hardcore straight edge scene and stuff.
I remember that was like, I think Jeremy from Humble Beginnings, and Bigwig.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was always, I talked to him in his interview. He always was really good with fashion, and he started doing that look where it was just like the tall socks when everyone was doing like the shorter socks, and I tried to pull that off, and it looked just like a fucking disaster.
Well, Jeremy, he's a very attractive man, right?
Yeah, and
he always got the girls.
I know, I was like, Jeremy, like you're a very good looking dude, so everything you were doing just like made sense. He's like, nah. I was like, no, trust me, like everyone wanted you.
It worked out for me. He had the spiky hair, and he was like, he was on point. Yeah,
he always could pull it off. I was like, I can't.
I had to rely on being deep.
Well, it's funny when you're talking about Jim. It reminded me. I'm gonna get back into like the whole origins of you guys, but we went on tour with the Lounge. Do you remember Lounge?
Oh yeah, yep.
So we meet them in Tampa, Florida, or Endicott City. We're playing a show with them, and this is our second or I forget which number tour this is. So we get this show, and Brian was their bass player. Was like 7 feet tall, and we show up. The show, there's like no one there. We're playing to each other. And I was like just trying to meet the band, and everyone else was like, we're getting along. And I just like Brian, for some reason, I felt like he just like hated me. And I was so afraid of him because I made some kind of joke, and he just gave me this look like he wanted to kill me. And by the end of the tour, like he like loved me. Yeah. And it's like I want to sort of like you're talking about Jim, remind me of that, because there was usually every band we went on tour with, like we'll talk about like being on tour with you guys too, that we got along all really well from the beginning. But just for Brian, it's like, I got to win this guy over somehow. And I don't think he's ever going to like me. But he's like this big, scary looking dude. And the same thing. He's like a total fucking teddy bear, like super nice. But I was like, I don't get what the beginning was. Like, it's like with Jim talking to Wendy, it sounded like he was just on a fucking mission. I mean, he just had his sights set on what he was going to do. And it's like, unless you... he had like it's like once he let you in, like you were golden, but before that it was just like, are you gonna get in my fucking way?
Totally. I mean, look, he was intense, and going back, I probably have a totally different perspective now, but he was intense. All those guys, I mean, I was scared shitless of them because we loved them. They were like fans, and to me, Jason was like the Elvis of punk rock. He was like this dude.
Yeah.
I mean, he just looked like like a rock star to me. But he at the same time was also like an artist and like a real dude. I mean, like it was a different thing. And so it was kind of the people we looked up to. They were like our older brothers. We were really, at the time, we were like the youngest people in the scene, basically. And so, or at least the people who were doing that kind of tour. So we were like 18, and they were all older than us. And Jim, they gave him shit, and we kind of like saw that, and we learned that his facade. It's funny because the Windy stuff was all like the year before this tour. This tour was in 1997. So, and the funny thing is, one time I don't know why we were doing this, but we followed Jim around some European city. It might have been me and Ben, or maybe it was me and Jason. We followed Jim, unbeknownst to him, and he goes right into like this BDSM shop. And I'm like, and so when Ultimate Devotion came out, I was like, I knew it. Like it wasn't a surprise to me because of that. I was like, oh,
that must have been awesome to hear Wendy's story where she's talking about that then.
Yeah, I mean,
the two of them.
I can understand why she might be pissed about the song and it being a little bit personal.
I didn't understand. I mean, let's talk about Strung Out the Whole Time with Jim Cherry, but when she said that, I was like, I don't get it. Like, especially if you're very vocal about being that way, and that's how you're into that stuff. And then the song itself, like the song's a great song. I never heard it, or I never paid attention to it until after that interview. Now I add it to my Spotify playlist, and I hear it all the time.
Right.
And even listen to it, I'm like, yeah, I don't get I mean, from her perspective, yes, it's personal, and she's thinking everyone's seeing it like that. But even now that I know it's about the two of them, I still just listen to the song for the song.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think most people did, and I think a lot of people just assumed that it was that Jason wrote it, right, or somebody was his lyrics or something. It wasn't him. Didn't really necessarily think it was Jim, and I think she even mentioned like poor Jason had to sing that and get kind of like all these. I'm sure many a leather booted girl came up to him after that, but
probably changed his world. He's like,
I was
I'm
like,
scared,
what?
But I'll try this now.
But ultimately, it's a great song, and Jim wrote some of the best songs for Strung Out. It was kind of a bummer when he got kicked because he was a great influence, and it changed the sound of the band quite a bit, even though I think they're still a great band and they still did amazing things. But I mean, like I said, we did a lot of work with them. I mean, I think that Jordan was a huge influence on Pat. Pat was an amazing drummer.
Oh my God.
And they really liked each other and actually really respect each other. We even had a show where they did sort of a bit of a drum off, and it was pretty badass to watch.
Wow. Yeah. Pat was fucking sick.
He's a great drummer.
Yeah, you guys are all really good musicians. That was the one thing that stood out to us, was that you guys kicked ass at that, and like the harmonies and all that stuff. And when was the last time, before I start talking about like going back in the past, but I mean going back to your younger self, but when was the last time? I think the last time we saw each other was at the end of the tour we did together, because I don't think we saw each other after that. I don't know if you guys toured back in. No, wait, you did. You came back. You guys were touring through. Either I'm mixing this up. I remember partying with you guys at Del Vecchio's house. Either that was before our tour together or that was after. Do you remember that?
So there was a tour. Okay, there was a couple tours after we did our thing. Because I was, frankly, actually, just to be completely honest, I remember the very beginning of all this stuff like pretty crisply. And then there's a bunch of years in the middle where it all is a little bit mixed up, and I'm not sure the order of operations on some tours and shows and stuff. I know and then at the very end, it's pretty hazy. Maybe Repression, I don't know what, but But I do know that I think after we did our thing, we had a spate of shows together. There was a couple tours. One where we had I'm trying to think. There was a couple where we came up north, and we had.
You say it was Sean, maybe.
Yeah. We came through. And we stayed, and everybody was around. I mean, the New Jersey scene's like that. Like, you come in, you see everybody.
Yeah.
Right? You almost see everybody, as long as you're going through close to somebody's town.
Well, everyone lives like an hour or 30 minutes away from where the show was, so everyone would show up, and it'd be like a reunion.
Well, Rob was like our roadie for a couple of tours, and we may have met up during for some shows at least. And then
Heiner?
Yeah.
Was he really?
Do you remember Heiner came out on the road with us for a bit?
I totally forgot.
I mean, I vividly remember because I unfortunately saw his dong a couple times.
Yeah, I have photos of him and Chris jumping on your guys' bus at the end of the last one. They were completely naked, and you guys are like jumping out of the way.
I do now. No, God, I repressed that, but it's all come back.
Oh, I have the photo. It's real.
No, but what you're saying about people getting, being a little bit intimidated first or having whatever. I mean, there's hazing too.
Yes.
We did hazing with the Humble guys a little bit. even though we loved them.
Yeah.
And we definitely did it with the Mock Orange guys, and I think they got a little freaked out by it sometimes, but we all became friends
I thought you guys
because
were really chill,
we'd do
though.
crazy shit with them. We'd like shit in a bottle and put a Whippersnapper sticker on it and put holes in it and put it under one of their bus seats and hope they find it, you know, or maybe they'd never find it.
I didn't see this behavior at all when we were on tour. I thought you guys were very just chill. Like,
yeah,
really
different
chill.
phases. I think there's various phases we were in, you know.
Yeah, this is when the long walk was out. So maybe you had matured into non-bottle shitting.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I'm trying to think exactly. So it was a long walk tour. That must have been towards the end of that when that record was out, and then we went off and we did the changeover. Okay, so I'm trying to remember place that exactly in the thing. And I think that when we did our shows, it was like part of was it one tour with you guys, or was it part of a bigger tour where you were on like a leg? Because we kind of did that too. We would tour with one band for like 2 weeks and then meet up with another band and tour with them for like another couple weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you guys were splitting off. Sean would probably know. Sean Lamar, he would probably know more than me because, like, I can remember a good amount, but yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember if we met you guys somewhere or if we started. I don't think we started in New Jersey with you because you guys were in Athens.
Yeah.
And I think it was because I used to take photos on all the tours, so I had like one of those cameras where it was a snap and it was like you took the picture, then you'd roll the dial and then did another. It was like physical photos.
Right.
So I used to buy those Kodak ones. Then I had a real like camera. I'd buy film, but I still have this rubber crate in my closet here, and it's got every tour that's labeled. It's like tour 1, tour 2, and they're all in the actual photos that are like rubber band.
That's really great, man. I did not take photos. I was I had this sort of like live in the moment thing that I was doing at the time, which everybody is now mindfulness, but now I'm like, man, it'd be great to have photos of some of that stuff I did.
I'll have to take some photos and send them to you because just like the way we were dressed and stuff, it's like it was just, it's like us at Denny's and you guys playing, or we're
Denny's. Yeah, moon's over my hammy.
I don't think I've ever been to Denny's since I stopped being in a band. That or Waffle House. I would just like not go into those places because I'm way above that. I'm just kidding.
I just remember we used to go to Denny's a lot for whatever reason. I can't remember why. And I do remember there was this one time that these guys took us out to Denny's. So like they're fan guys that were cool, and they were being funny. But one of them was like pretty big fat guy, right? This is back when Ben Allington was a guitar player. And the guy ordered Moons Over My Hammy, and Ben just started cracking up, just would not stop laughing at the fact that the guy ordered Moons Over My Hammy and he was a huge fat kid. And I was like, dude, we're guests. You need to be more polite.
That's awful. Actually, one quick story. I talked this in the Josh Humble interview. So Josh, we're on tour with Humble, and we stayed with this kid in Chicago, and we stayed downstairs in his house, and he's putting us up, and his friends were over. And then they left, and Josh said something in front of the kid whose house we're staying at about his friends. He's like, "Oh, thank God all the mutants have left." We're like, Josh, the kid's still here. Like,
he's a blunt guy.
Yeah,
I haven't talked to him in forever either, but I love Josh, and we always had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We toured with those guys quite a bit, and they were great guys too. I mean, look, the New Jersey scene was a great scene, and it was filled with lots of characters.
Mm-hmm.
And the Humble guys were, Del Vecchio, I loved him to death. We had a lot of fun at his house. We got snowed in there once we were so stupid at the very beginning. Like we decided, we're going to tour the Northeast in like fucking February or something, January. So we're from the South, we had no idea what the weather would be like. And so we're in a van with no heat, and Jesus. A bunch of shows got canceled. And we had a fire because we were trying to stay warm on the bus. I'll tell you about that at some point in a minute here. But Del Vecchio, he pretty much put us up for like 3 or 4 days in a row because all the shows were getting canceled because of the weather. And so we spent a lot of time in his basement, which was pretty I think his parents' house even.
Yeah,
it was pretty hilarious. And we met a lot of people in this sort of local Jersey scene at the time, which was
I think that's the party I'm talking about because I think it was snowing outside. So DeVecchio lived in Panther Valley in Hackettstown, New Jersey. His parents did. I don't know if they still live there, but it's very hilly there. Even driving there in 80, it's just this slope going down because it's even below. It's at sea level. I don't know. It's like it's at a lower elevation than the majority of Jersey. So you have to take 80 all the way down to that. So it's just this hill, which is when it's icy is awful, especially when you're in like a bus like you guys. And then his parents lived on the driveway was up a hill, so I can imagine.
Yeah, the hill of the driveway was intense because we had like a converted airport shuttle bus that we had made into our tour bus, and but I mean we were there. It was awesome, and he was great. He was so the hospitality. I always thought that New Jersey kids were very much like Southern kids with a different kind of accent. Because they were very hospitable and they threw shows and they fed you and all that stuff, and he was like, we were freezing. And so he's like, hey, why don't you take, this was where hospitality meets stupidity on our parts. So he says, hey, why don't you take this portable heater with you? And it's like one of those heaters that screws into a little propane tank.
Oh God.
And we say, okay, sure. And we get it. But the thing is, it's a little loose. And so it keeps like kind of, and the tank is almost empty. So, but we're freezing our asses off. We didn't bring coats or anything. Like we're in the van. There's no heat. We're on the Jersey Turnpike, and the heater to make it work. We take like a scrap of our curtain, which is basically bed sheets we made into curtains, tear it off and tie it around the valve to keep the valve open.
Oh my God.
The thing is also loose, so it's like as the van is bouncing around. The heater keeps kind of moving around and suddenly this is so dumb. So then the heater literally like falls over on the piece of the curtain, bursts into flames, and then because it's holding the valve open, that melts the valve and it shoots a bunch of propane across and puts the other curtain is on fire. Now the bus is on fire. We're all in the back screaming, holy shit. We're on the fucking New Jersey Turnpike. There's nowhere to go. And Pat pulls over to the side, opens the door. All the dudes go running off the bus like a bunch of pansies. Oh my God. Or, our shit's, our everything we own is about to go up. Right. And so Pat, who's a badass, stands up, puts on a glove, calmly walks back, puts his hand into the fire and turns off and closes off the propane tank. And saves all of our asses because he would have killed all of the equipment. I mean, it was the craziest thing ever, and probably the closest, to serious bodily injury we got on the tour. But it was, but it was all because of DeVecchio's hospitality.
This is going to be a great interview.
It was a crazy time. I mean, there were lots of stuff that happened like that.
Well, you guys also you had the loft in the back, and we had the loft, but you couldn't get to that exit door in the back, right? Because all the equipment and the bags and
no, there was an exit in the roof, like an old school bus, so that you could get out through the loft. And in fact, I think one time, much to my own embarrassment and chagrin, I retired to the bus early on a drinking binge one night. We were out partying, and as everybody was coming back up, I was having the wake up in the middle of the night and throw up, and I come bursting through that exit and dry heaving on the roof of the bus as everyone else is walking up to get in with the girls they had met that night. It was pretty not my finest moment. I think it was in Canada, so it doesn't count. Yeah.
Jesus, man, I did not get to see this behavior on our tour. I didn't.
I think later on, we got a little bit more wild. I mean, I think we were a little more reserved at the first, and not that the long walk was the first, but we were on tour having fun, and so we had more fun sometimes than we probably should have. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember specifically when the one we did with you. Probably we were a little more reserved, especially with people that we were just meeting. You know what I mean? Like we did once we got comfortable with people. I think we were a little bit crazier. They got to see the crazier side of us.
Yeah. Okay, so let's so even though we've covered a lot of ground here, I want to go back and talk about you personally and what got you into music, what got you into punk rock, how that led to starting, what the scene was like in Athens, and then how that led to Whippersnapper, and then a bunch of stories from there.
Yeah. So I started playing music when I was 13 years old with Pat Kerr as a drummer and then Ben Allington on on guitar, and this guy Nick Baker, who was the original bass player for Whippersnapper. And basically, it was the original Whippersnapper minus Jason, and we were a garage band. And we didn't live in Athens; we lived in south of Atlanta in Fayette County, and we were really, really lucky because there was a scene there. It wasn't punk scene; it was just like a rock scene, and it was kind of pre-punk actually. I mean, it was out there, but it was in that sort of lull between the SoCal rise of the Southern California punk scene and like the last iteration of like Dead Kennedys and Descendants and all those people, right? Mm-hmm. So it was like and Black Flag. So it was sort of like the in between 80s and 90s punk scenes. There was that alternative scene, Nirvana, all that stuff was going on, and so there was a ton of garage bands and a very, very, very local scene. And we started all really young, and we were playing garage metal basically. You know, we did a lot of metal, and punk was around. It was part of our what we listened to, but it was, I'm not exactly sure exactly. I think Ben Allington first introduced me to the Descendants, and I was already aware of like, you know, old school stuff like, but more mainstream, like the Runaways, and I guess Joan Jett from that, who's got a bit of a punk edge, right? And I knew about the Sex Pistols and all that, but I didn't know the Descendants. I knew the Ramones. Me and Ben were like wild kids, and we were always getting in trouble at school. And so the teacher allowed us at the end of the week if we would be good, right?
Yeah.
If we were behaved at the end of the week, we could do something crazy. And so one week, you know, he had this really crappy guitar, and we would listen to the Ramones and Descendants at his house, and all these different bands that he was into, DRI, Sepultura, whatever metal bands we were listening to. And he would learn how to play. He was a really great guitar player, and we decided we were going to do a song, so we did the Ramones Learn to Listen in front of a group of kids, right? And it was like maybe like our class. And we got up there, and I didn't have a mic. I just screamed as loud as I could the lyrics to Learn to Listen by the Ramones. And so we just played together, and we started a band, and we did that for years. And then we decided we like really liked doing this. The punk thing started really coming on, and Jason Joseph was another guy who could play guitar, and he played very technically good at guitar. And he was really into the punk scene. Like, so he introduced me to all kinds of stuff. The Swedish punk scene, Satanic Surfers, Millencolin, like way before they had Epitaph Relief, that kind of thing. And he was into the zine culture and everything. So he introduced me to a lot of that. What happened was the SoCal sound just sort of came out. And so I think we really, really hit us when Punk and Drublic came out with No Effects.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like these bands were happening, and people knew about Pennywise, and they knew about No Effects, and then more and more and more was happening. And we got deeper into the scene, and we're starting to learn about people locally and in Florida. And we started doing, we became Whippersnapper probably when I was around 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
We started playing faster punk rock oriented stuff. And then we started actually doing shows right then. We were going out of town to Florida. We were going out of town at 16 years old. I don't know how the hell we pulled it off. And we were doing like, weekends or whatever. And at some point where I was like, look, guys, I love this and I want to do this. And so if you're with me, let's like try to give a real run at this before we all have to go off and, try to do college or whatever. Right. Or go get a job, or, we're done with school. Let's go out to California. Maybe we can try to see if anybody's into this first.
Wait,
right?
This is when you were 16?
So we're 16 when we started doing all the shows. By the time I get to the end of high school, so 17, 18,
oh, okay.
We're like, look, we made a bunch of demos. We sent them out, and we got interest. People were interested because, we had that one thing when we were 18 where we recorded Holiday Road by Lindsey Buckingham.
Oh yeah.
And we did a ska and heavy and punk version of it. So the verses were ska, and then the choruses were like fast Southern Cal punk, and that got on a comp that Fearless put out.
Yeah, I do remember. Which Fearless comp was that on?
Punk Bites.
Punk Bites. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to look that up while we're talking. Okay.
Yeah, that's how. So Fearless was.
Wait, hold on. Before that though, like, you guys got together and you started playing. What was the scene in Athens like?
So we didn't move to Athens until after the Long Walk, man. Or actually, right during the Long Walk.
Oh, so you guys you lived, because I remember when we stayed at Andy's girlfriend's house. Andy Girl's house, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, at the time it was Jason's girlfriend. Now it's Andy's wife.
No, but Andy was dating Andy.
What?
Andy, bass player.
Yes.
His girlfriend's house. I thought her name was Andy.
I don't know.
Oh, whatever.
Then maybe there was a different. Maybe you're thinking of a different girlfriend.
But was that obviously 20 years ago? So I'm guessing.
Yeah,
But like,
lots of yeah.
but so you guys didn't live. You guys didn't grow up in Athens?
So Athens is like a college and music town, right? So REM is from Athens, Driving and Crying.
Yeah.
Lots of like Georgia music from Athens, and there's a big scene up there. We were from like the hinterlands of Atlanta, and we played Atlanta. We were an Atlanta punk rock band. Like we played the 513 Club and all and the Point and all these old clubs that used to be like where you would play. And we moved to Athens when we were living with our parents when we did our first record, you know. And then we moved out and moved to Athens because it was a scene and because there was recording studios and clubs and we knew all kinds of people there. And so so it was different. I mean, the Athens punk scene, we kind of came into it. It was already there. The Athens punk scene was very different. It was like more of a dirtier, there was some screamo and some like old school punk. It wasn't like a melodic punk scene. And then there was also guys who had been in Athens forever who were doing punk from like a totally different perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of like grind stuff and Quadriacho was from up there and Atlanta, I guess.
Why did you want to move to Athens though? Just because of that scene?
Well, it was a cheap place to live with a bunch of music opportunities and the ability to like practice spaces. We had the same. We probably had a practice space. It was like an old abandoned warehouse that Widespread Panic also used for a practice space. A bunch of other bands, and so there was all of the resources you needed as a musician in the South for not that much money, and it was a good base of operations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Atlanta was like all spread to hell, and it was not an easy place to get around. And, of course, I didn't want to be at home anymore because we're done with being kids. And so we had to get out and everybody moved to Athens and made sense to us. And we were on the road all the time anyway. I mean, that was the whole point for us was to like be on the road as much as possible.
So you guys graduated high school.
Hit the road.
You hit the road. You just hit the road. You just get a van. Now, did you guys have the airport bus then? Or
no. We had this blue Dodge van that was that Nick Baker owned. His dad owned, and we booked a tour with Shyster, a pretty great band from Florida, out to California and up the coast to San Francisco, and then that was it. They were just going to drive back. And the point of that tour was to meet with Lobster and to meet with Fearless. And we did. I mean, we did a bunch of shows on the way out, met a bunch of people, went through Texas and Arizona and all that stuff, and then we got to L.A. And I mean, it was a crazy time, man. I was like 18 years old and asleep in the van. I woke up alone in the van and on the beach because I fell asleep. Everybody else had gone off to get breakfast or something. I wake up on the van on the beach in LA, and I get out of the van and it's like quiet, really quiet. And I'm walking down the street and there's this like really good looking black woman walking towards me, who I'm like, holy shit, this is Pam Grier. It's Foxy Brown. What the fuck? And then I hear, cut, get that guy out the fuck out of there. I turn around, and it's like I'm on a movie set. There's Quentin Tarantino shooting Jackie Brown.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and that was Pam Grier walking down the street, and behind him is like De Niro and Bridget Fonda talking and shit. And I'm like, what the fuck? Everything they say about California is true, So it was totally crazy, and I got out of the scene, obviously. And then I learned to hate LA pretty quickly because it's a pretty pretentious place. And then
LA, I hate it.
Yeah, and then we drove up and we stayed with Steve, and we stayed with Bob Becker, and we met the Bigwig guys for the first time, and eventually we did a show for them down in Atlanta, and they stayed at my house, which was pretty interesting because my dad brought out all this like southern Texas. My dad's from Texas, and we're in the South, and so my dad wakes up early, makes like tons of eggs and bacon and sausage and like all this pancakes. And it's like, they're all fucking vegans. He didn't know. And we don't know that like, you can't just turn off being vegan. Yeah. Right. So, it was pretty funny. And we went out there and we went up and down the coast and played. And then we got back to Georgia and got a call from Steve who was like, I want to do this. And he sent us a contract. And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. So I just did it. And, it wasn't like my parents were happy or anybody else was happy that it wasn't, older than I about it. They were like, it's kind of risky to go out and do this. But it was a path I took, man. I mean, when I ended doing it, I went to college at like 25 and I just moved from there. So it's like, I just do the things that I try to do because I want to have an interesting life.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was the thing I wanted to do. And I really loved it. And if it had gone differently, maybe I'd still be doing it. But like, eventually, we had a lot of fun, met a lot of fans, and put out really great music. but like you said, we're all good musicians to some degree. I think that might have been not so great for us. Like we were more musicians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of times, like a lot of our stuff was pretty technical. All the harmonies and stuff I loved, but like some people find that too much, you know. But I loved it. And then of course on our last record, it was a little bit different. And I think that we made some changes, not because that's what we necessarily wanted to do artistically, but because we were trying to do what producers and record people thought we should be doing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so taking you back, so Lobster Records, so on Steve's interview, he's like, I get this demo tape from these guys and I call them up. So I got his side of it. So tell me about like how you guys thought of Lobster and what did you send him?
Yeah, so we sent him a demo cassette tape. That's how long this was.
Yeah.
And it was it had a picture of the Noid, who was the
Domino's guy.
Yeah, the Domino's guy, but he had a W instead of an N on him, and it had the Holiday Road song and a bunch of other songs, some of which actually were on America's Favorite Pastime in demo form. And we sent this out to everybody. We sent it to Fat. We sent it to everybody. We sent it to Swedish labels. So me and Jason would just like every weekend we were sending out like as many of these as we could to everyone we could think of.
Wow.
Because we really wanted to do this and we had a plan, you know. And so we got notes back from everybody, including Fat. I mean, Fat was like, thanks a lot, but not really looking for somebody right now. You know, if you're ever in San Francisco, let us know and we'll come to the show. Something like that. And they all sent like sort of handwritten things back, which was nice for everybody.
Yeah.
And Steve wrote something and said, really love this. You know, if you're out here, we'd really like to meet you. And it was a little more affirmative. And then with Bob, we'd already done something with Punk Bites, so we had a connection there. And so we wanted to be on a label as soon as possible. And he was very cool about it, you know. But the thing is, the reason why we picked Lobster is because of Buck Wild. They had Sean Dewey, who was the guitar player from Lagwagon, and you know, at the time, Sean Dewey and Joey were like the two main people at Lagwagon.
Yeah.
And the plan, I mean, I know this didn't come out in Steve's interview as much as it might have, but like the plan was, so basically Lagwagon, you know, blew up because they were good, and also because NoFX took them on the road for like 2 years straight.
Yeah.
You know, and so the idea was Sean Dewey was going to be the Fat Mike of Lobster Records, and we were going to get good bands, quality bands, and record them, and then take them out with Lagwagon for an extended period of time and blow them up. And after we signed the deal, Sean got fired from Lagwagon.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it sucked. I mean, and it sucked for everybody, including Sean, I'm sure. But he and Joey apparently had a lot of contentiousness. I mean, I'm sure that'd be an interesting interview if he ever could get in touch with them.
Yeah.
But so he got fired and or he left. I mean, I think I had the sense he got fired, or that it was a mutually like, fuck you guys, I'm not doing this anymore kind of a thing. But he was out, and he had Buck Wild, and he was going to focus on Buck Wild. But Buck Wild didn't. You know, Buck Wild wasn't going to have the same draw as Lagwagon. It's similar to, you know. It's just a solo artist from a bigger group. Their bigger group is almost always going to have the bigger draw. It's very it's not very common that it goes the other way. So, you know, he had to move on to Buck Wild, and Lobster had to pivot entirely its strategy, because the strategy was hinged on Sean and him being able to take bands out. And so lots of things changed after that. And, you know, we loved Lobster. We were out there being evangelical for Lobster. You know, we put their giant lobster on the back of all our shirts, and like we were out there putting their stickers all over every club we toured. We really spread the gospel when it came to Lobster, and I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, when we got to a point where we were unhappy with things, we just didn't feel like we got as much appreciation for the things that we did as we maybe should have, and maybe that was wrong, but at the time that's how it felt, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we went out there, you know, with Lobster. The thing was, they got us on the road immediately with Strung Out, and that was great. And then we came back and did a bunch of touring. I mean, one of the biggest problems for us as a band was we never could find a really good booking agent consistently. And you really need a great booking agent to make it work, especially now. At the time, it wasn't as crucial because, you know.
I think it was pretty crucial. I mean, we would be booking our own shit, and we had Sean doing it, and we'd show up like with you guys when we were on tour, and it'd be us and playing to you guys playing to us. But when you have a good booking agent like Andrew Ellis, we were trying to get him to book us. He would get you, like, especially if they had a catalog of bigger bands, and he was booking the Get Up Kids. That back then, I mean, that would get you on just get you on a show where there's more heads there, or even in clubs and things like that. I mean, that was really important back
I
then, I
mean, we
thought.
went through a bunch of different people, and we had some people that were good and did some good stuff, and we also did our own things, and some of them were. I mean, when you asked Steve about Book Your Own Fucking Life, that's how we did our first tour out to California. Book
Yeah.
Your Fucking Life and other stuff. And he's right. It wasn't an absolutely perfect resource, but it was useful for the band the first time, not for ever, you know?
Yeah.
And we had some really good, I think we worked with Andrew for a minute, if I remember correctly, but we went through a bunch of different people. We just couldn't find anybody consistent. And, we also didn't have a manager. I was basically the manager, which was fine. But at the same time, it's nice to have somebody just taking care of stuff so you can take care of your own, creative life. And, so that created some issues, but for the most part, we were trying to get on bigger tours and do our own tours in between those bigger tours. And it worked. I mean, we got to do some great tours, great shows, met a lot of my heroes, and had a lot of really amazing experiences. And one of the reasons why we went to Fuel by Ramen after Lobster was because we could go out and tour with Les and Jake and do bigger tours through them, So it was just more for us. It was the more people we can get in front of, the better. That was always kind of the plan.
What did you guys put out on Fuel by Ramen?
So our last record we put out on Fuel by Ramen, Appearances Wear Thin, and it was a very different. So it went America's Favorite Pastime at Lobster, then The Long Walk at Lobster, and then there was this interim release of like our early demos on a non-label called Second Heaven in Atlanta, and then we moved to Fuel by Ramen. We left Lobster and went to Fuel by Ramen, and we were there before the whole Fall Out Boy thing and all that. And, and Roger from Les and Jake produced the record, Roger Lima. And,
Shit.
Yeah, we toured with them, and it was an amazing time, but the record came out, the sound was a little bit different than our previous sound. And there was some dissension about that among fans and also among the group. And, and Vinny, it got us on the label and basically, one issue was we're going to try to find you guys, help you guys get a booking agent, but that didn't quite materialize. So it made it a little bit difficult. And I think that, we eventually, there was some issues among the guys about who's going to write and do whatever. And I just got to a point where I was like, I'm done with that. I'm tired of dealing with 4 other people for my future. And I want to just rely on myself and explore other things,
Well, how did you guys write songs?
So it changed over time, but it was very collaborative, and we really hit the peak of what we were doing with songwriting during the Long Walk, because we and I think you mentioned this in your interview with Steve. We went out to this lake out in Kansas. It was called Lone Star Lake. We had a cabin that a friend of ours gave us access to. It was Andy's grandparents actually owned the cabin and let us just use it. And we basically wrote all day. We had like a digital 16 track or something like that, and we would write all day and fuck around and play all night or fish if we couldn't write or whatever. And the real writing process was really 2 steps. So the band would write a song, and sometimes I would have input on it, sometimes I wouldn't, where I would basically say, like, this part's more of a verse or this part's more of a chorus, but they would basically jam out until they found a really good song and work on the components of it, the guitar parts and everything, and get a put together song. And then we would record that song, and then I would overlay a melody, harmonies, and vocal parts to what they had put together for the song. So we did it completely ass backwards. Like usually bands would do, you write a song around the melody. Yeah. And this time the song would be written, the melody would come in second. It would come in to fit sort of the view of the song. And a lot of times I would sit down with Jason, and he would play the part that we thought was the chorus over and over again, and we would sing together and harmonize and just with like vowels until we kind of got like, what do we think the melody is going to be here? And then I would write lyrics to fit that, right? Yeah. And so I wrote all the lyrics and most of the melodies and harmonies and other parts, and Jason also helped a lot with the harmonies. And so we would all sing. We would have 4-part harmonies, we'd have 3-part harmonies, we'd have 1 2-part harmony going this way, and then a counter rhythm on another vocal part. And I had this weird theory that, I never told anybody about as to what that was supposed to be about. It's supposed to be like, a lot of my songs were about, people and about, specific things that happen. And the whole idea of these like counter melodies and multiple parts is supposed to be sort of like internal conflict. It was supposed to be, person dealing with something and they've got these competing things going on inside, right?
Yeah.
And so I was very into all that stuff. I mean, and later we had a similar setup at our practice space, and the guys would record stuff, and I could go in there and be up all night playing with the vocals until we got something that we liked. And then we'd take all that stuff to the studio and do it for real with a producer and comments on, what they thought would be better. And the first time we did that was, we did it with Sean Dewey, and it was, out in California. And then the long walk was at the blasting room with the guys from the Descendants, and Jason Livermore. And it was amazing. And we had a great time there. And, Stephen Edgerton was like in the perfect pitch guy. The guy has perfect pitch, like amazing, his ear. And so we would be in the studio. Bill Stevenson, he kind of like picked us up from the airport and farted in the car and rolled up the windows. Right? And like showed up every once in a while with sandwiches and was like cool, but like he really wasn't like involved in the record that much. You know what I mean? I know, dude. You got to understand. For me, for a guy who listened to like Milo Goes to College when I was like in the 5th grade or whatever, and then to have that guy like do exactly that kind of thing after he picked you up from the airport, it was kind of like, this is disgusting and amazing at the same time, right?
That'd be like if you got produced by Mark Hoppus from Blink and he just picks you up and he just pulls his dick out and just like slaps you in the face with it in the car, and you're like, that makes sense.
Yeah, I put a show on for Blink when I was 17 years old and they were 18.
Talk about
in Atlanta.
So, wait, I want to hear about this. I want to hear about this.
Well,
story.
so they came through. I put on a show for them at the where was it? It was at the Rec Room, and it was like on a Thursday night, I would think, or Wednesday night. It was, and everybody's underage, and the Rec Room would do these underage shows. They came, and this is like when it came from Uranus, 7-inch was out and stuff. This is early fucking Blink before they blew up. And they were super cool. I mean, they didn't stick around very long. They took off. But like, the funny thing was, I booked the show, and even then, like, all the girls showed up, right? And like, it was just a girl fest, basically. And so there was maybe only 30 people there, but they were all girls, And they were going nuts, and it was a great show. They put on a great show. We opened. It was a lot of fun, and it was amazing. And then later I'd hear more stories about them in those early days from other dudes that put on shows for them about them like fucking their girlfriends and stuff, because they had a bad reputation for fucking your girlfriend.
God, sounds like they were like early version of the Ataris.
I guess, but I mean, whatever they were on their records was actually who those dudes were. I think they were pretty genuine, and they blew up, of course. And but I mean, yeah, it was like I can't remember. It was probably like late night. I was still in high school, I think, at the time.
So this was in Atlanta then.
Yeah, this was in Atlanta at the Rec Room, which is no longer around, but it was like this shitty little club on the Georgia Tech campus.
Was the
where we did lots of stuff.
Was the 512? Was that name of it? The
513.
513. That sounds really familiar. I think we played a show there.
I'm sure you did.
Was it like concrete walls and just not really like a club, or it was like an industrial park or something like that?
No, so it was on Edge. It was off of Edgewood Avenue. It was a small little club. It had concrete walls and a small bar and a small stage, but it was like where the scene happened for a certain period of time in Atlanta punk rock history, right? So and the guys who ran it and everything, they were great. I mean, they were cool. They did all kinds of shows. They were definitely more old school oriented, but they let us come in and do a bunch of stuff. We would pack that place out, and we would also bring other bands in through there a lot of times. Because and so they were the club. I mean, the thing is, there were a lot of places in Atlanta that closed down. The Rec Room closed down. The Point closed down. We would go to all those shows in high school. We would go and see Tim Pole, and we would go see whoever we could see. We would go see. Yeah. And then when we could start to play with them, we would play with them. So like early shows that we could do with like Rhythm Collision. Just anybody we could play with, we would play with. And
Rhythm Collision is definitely a band that I've been thinking about interviewing, because I didn't really get a chance to know them or see them. But what label were those guys on? Was it Lookout or Revelation?
I want to say it was either Lookout, or maybe they even had something on Fearless in the early days, like the early days of Fearless. I'm having a hard time remembering. I remember the sticker in my mind. I actually have a lot of stuff with a bunch of the old stickers all over it. So I was looking at listening to podcasts has brought back a ton of memories, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, Rhythm Collision, that was an early show we did, Blink 182. And we eventually got to, like I said, we met the Descendants, we met Bat Religion guys, you know, everybody, and Lagwagon,
Wow.
Sean Dewey. And so we met lots of people, and and it was sort of like you meet all your heroes, and you get to do a lot of cool stuff. And the guys from Less Than Jake were amazing. We listened to them since Pezcore, obviously, as well, because they were especially in the South, because they were bigger, you know, in the region before they became like huge.
Yeah.
And going on tour with them was amazing. They were all awesome guys. We had a lot of fun with them, and they always had interesting people show up, you know. And I remember one time we had a show with them, and I look over, we're playing, opening up, and fucking George Clinton from P-Funk is on the side of the stage nodding his head to our set. And I'm like, well, this is probably the greatest moment of my life, right? Like, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened. And then, you know, he was just like, oh, nice set or whatever when I come off the stage. And I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to forget this.
Wow. And you have it 20 years later.
That happened. No,
It's
I mean,
still
it was amazing. And they had lots of friends like that because they just knew everybody. They were like, you know, great band and also like a lot of fun. So I think that's how they were to pull that off.
Real quick, Doctor Strange Records. That's who they.
Yeah, Doctor Strange. Yeah. And I think we were interested in doing Doctor Strange records too. You know, I mean, we loved, you know, Voodoo Glow Skulls, Less Than Jake. We loved everybody. We were just totally into this scene at the time. And then we went out there and we got involved in the California thing. You know, Steve was a great guy. He's you'd have to meet him to understand, but like when as soon as I heard his voice, he came rushing back. He's kind of like an old hippie who got into the punk scene, and he just loves music, you know.
Yeah, he sounded like he just genuinely did.
He does genuinely do, but I mean, you know, he had a lot of pressure on him with all that stuff, and with the label, and they did pretty good for what it was. And then we went to Fuel by Ramen. They did, you know, it was fine. They were good guys too, but I mean, we just couldn't quite get the together the kind of sound and touring that we wanted at the time, and I think that sort of led to the unraveling of it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because Steve, he didn't get a chance to really talk about. You know, I didn't really want to push him on it either on like the whole like the label falling like ending, because he he signed a really shitty deal with a label. I don't know who that label is, who took over the record, but it ended up fucking him over, and then he went into like this shitty part of his life for a minute, which he talked about. But like, was that moment? Did you say like that's the moment where you guys jumped ship and went to Fuel, or were you guys already?
No, I think we'd already left, because the thing is, like, the reason why we knew the Yellow Card guys well before they ever got on Lobster or did anything. I mean, we knew them when we were, I think, met them some of the first times we went to Jacksonville, you know, and played with them. And then they came on the label, and some other folks did, and everybody, you know, he talked a lot about tour support. We got merchandise and stuff from Lobster, which was a form of tour support, I suppose. But it also was good for Lobster because it had their name all over it, you know, and we were out there like spreading the word. And then other people were coming around, and they were, in our view, getting more help from the label than we were. And, you know, these guys, and I think the scene was also changing a lot. I mean, like,
what year was this though? When it was 7?
Oh, I mean, this is like the late, oh God.
Was it like
You're
early
pressing
2000s?
me. Yeah, early 2000s. You know, I mean,
Yes,
like the scene, everything moved, shifted, and there was an emo thing that changed a lot of stuff. And then there was also just, I think that, you know, we were in a unique position because I think we were sort of in the transition generation between like the Fat Records folks and then the people that were more in the sense of like a Newfound Glory generation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so like between there, things changed. The scene ethics changed. Like people who were coming in wanted to be huge rock stars. Yeah. That was not the way it was when we started doing this, you know, like, and people were doing stuff with an eye to getting on majors and being on MTV. That was the enemy when we started.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it was just completely different. And I think, you know, we grew up a lot too, and we're looking like, you know, I don't think we were opposed to being on a major towards the end. We just wanted somebody who believed in our music and was willing to let us do what we wanted to do creatively, you know? I mean, we got approached a few times, but I think we probably should have been a little bit more like, we want to take over the world rather than we want to have creative integrity.
I don't know, man. Like when we started playing, I wanted to be, my focus was being as big as Less Than Jake or
right.
no effects where I just wanted to show up and pack a giant club every time and have the whole crowd just go ape shit and create this thing
Yeah.
in that moment. And like there was some shows, like I'm sure you guys obviously witnessed many times, where that would happen and it wouldn't be huge, but it'd be enough. And then you go to the next day, it would be no one gave a fuck. But then you just had to just be like, okay, well, we kind of planted something here. We'll come back to it. And it was just frustrating to not get to that point where you were like, wow, I really wanted to be as big as NoFX, but I didn't want to be on MTV. And then what I think, the whole purpose of this podcast when I started it was I got jaded in the early 2000s because it became such a fucking fashion show. And these bands were just like, we're doing everything possible to make music just to get bigger, but we're not actually making authentic music. And I could see right through it. And I was like, what the fuck happened here? And I got so jaded.
I do agree. I think there was a period where we definitely felt that way. And after a certain point, stuff was so derivative of stuff that had been done already, and there wasn't a lot new happening, but it was being dumbed down. I mean, I remember we had a conversation. I had a conversation. I can't remember what the major label was at this point, but they basically was like, look, we love you guys, man, but you really need to dumb it down and get more repetitive. The guy literally said that, and get more repetitive. That's just crazy to me. But he's probably right. I mean, I continued to work in the music business after that for a little bit with Southern rock bands, and so did Pat. And so I got to see a little bit more of a different kind of scene where it was less of an issue, as the ethics were not really part of it, and to see how that works. And so it's just music business is the music. It's a very weird business. I think Hunter S. Thompson said it's like a long haul filled with pimps, prostitutes, and criminals, and then there's the bad part, right? So it's like it's a very weird thing, the music business, and we were in a special time. It was an organic time. It was like, and I was completely wrong about stuff because we were out in California, making records. Britney Spears is putting shit out. It's like in high school. Yeah. I thought this stuff is all a flash in the pan. It's like, Nirvana has broken the machine. There's no way that we're ever going back to this bullshit. And I was totally wrong. I was totally wrong. We went right back to it, and those people had long and varied careers and are superstars. Yeah. I never thought that would happen. I didn't think that. I thought that was all dead, and that we were living in a post pop world where where alternative had taken over and punk rock was breaking.
Well, here's my theory on that though. Like I think the masses don't. Majority of people, they don't like music. They like music, but they want to have something fed to them that's easy. It's like the people who buy microwave dinners. Like they don't want to learn how to make shit on their own. They don't want to learn about spices. It's a smaller amount of crowd that wants to do that. But the masses, they're like, I want shit force fed or just fed to me as is on a platter. It's easy to digest, and that's what the pop thing was, like the Britney Spears and the NSYNCs and shit like that. It's like. And then the record companies see that, so they throw a lot of music behind it, and it's just easy for that shit to just blow up. Like the shit that we write, it's a smaller portion of people that can get into that because it's not super easy. Some of the songs are super easy, but it's not as easy as fucking Britney Spears. And granted, there's some songs she put out, and I'm like, this is really catchy. Like I find myself. No, I know. Look, I also
came around to the fact that a lot of the people that I was giving no credit to have actually, maybe not the people themselves, they're performers, and that's a different issue, but like the writing that is being done by people who are very good musicians. They may not be writing the most amazingly technically complex music, but there's more to it than that. That's one of the problems with the balance of being a musician is like you can be technical and great if you don't have heart, or if you can't connect with an audience, then it doesn't matter. Yeah. And so we really have to strike that balance when you're doing stuff. And it's not an easy balance. And some people have it just naturally, and it really works. So, look, I've come a long way to all that stuff. And I really just love music now. And I don't have as much attitude about it. I still love punk rock too. I don't listen. Haven't heard anybody new in a long time who thrills me, but I go back sometimes. I love Pandora because you can like put in the stuff you liked from the scene and learn and hear of stuff from that era that you never heard of that was actually pretty good. And you're like, wow, why did I never hear of this band? And that's the amazing thing too about the scene. It was so big at the time, And there were so many, but not necessarily like every show was huge. There were just so many people doing things. It was just a creative outpouring, very organic, of the kids doing stuff, not like a group of businessmen getting together and getting the kids to do stuff.
Yeah.
It was like literally people doing this in their backyards and printing zines and having VFW shows and all that stuff. And I loved it. I loved that energy. And that's one of the reasons why I was into it. We go to Atlanta, and even though, you know, our band wasn't necessarily accepted, I would go to like the hardcore shows and watch these hardcore kids and the community and intensity they felt. And I thought that was great. I don't care if they didn't like my band or liked my band or whatever. I just thought it was great that they had that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have touched on that. It's crazy to think that these teenage crowd like built this thing on our own, and we just took the reins. And when we saw other people doing it, the different skills that people had, which they didn't know they'd had, they're like, oh, a zine. I can write. Like, let me put that together. And so that's what zines came out, and then bands playing music, and then someone's like, oh, they need someone to manage that, or they need someone to book shows, like, or book a tour for them, and all of these opportunities came for these people, and then we were all in our fucking we were teenagers or early 20s doing this shit on our fucking own, and it was just like so freeing to be able to get out of our fucking town or go to some place in town that wasn't the normal, like, oh, we're going to a movie theater tonight, we're going to go sit in a parking lot. It's like, no, we're going to go to a show where all this shit's happening around us, and it just popped up fucking everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing thing, a great way to connect. And for us, we did good. We really did a lot for people that were from Georgia and did it all on their own. And then, you know, made it through to do a lot of pretty great shit. I mean, we played with some big bands. We played in front of some huge crowds, and we played in front of some pretty big crowds that we brought in for relative to where we were in the scene, you know? And so I loved it, and I met lots of great people. I mean, the best part was the people and the fun. And frankly, the things I miss are writing. I don't miss the road, because, you know, you get to a certain age and you're just over it. But I miss writing the music, and I'm actually talking to Jason about maybe doing some more stuff just for fun. And I miss this I'll never get back. I miss that feeling when you're playing. There's a moment when you're really into it, and the crowd is really into it, and it's all intense, and you just feel like you can do anything.
Yeah.
And you like jump into the air and land on your knees, and the next day that's going to hurt. But right then it felt perfect.
Yeah.
You know, it felt like the right thing to do. And it's just intense. And it's like a high you can never get from any kind of drug. And that, you know, you can only probably tap into when you're between 18 and 28, right? And on the road and full of certainty about how the world should be and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things popped up there. I think, like you mentioned it earlier, you know, you called it, like, people now they call it mindfulness. It's now with a word. There's a word to it, but you're in the moment. And that was the thing. I've done a few things in my life since the band where I've been so in the moment. That's when, like if I'm designing things, like, right, I became like,
yeah, you're an
designer.
artist. You feel that flow state when you do art, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you are. It's like you are so present right there doing something, and then once you come out of it, and you're like, especially now, you're like, your phone, Instagram, everything around you, Facebook, like YouTube, and, you know, just everything's just shot at you all at once. But I loved about being in the band was that it was that 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes of being on stage. All of that was just, you were so there, and especially when the crowd was going nuts, then it made it even more like, wow, we're living in this bubble right now. And then it just ends, but you're the whole time. Like when we did a reunion show like last year in 2018, I felt that again. Like, right. I wasn't worried about debt. I wasn't worried about, like, being old. I wasn't worried about any of this shit. Like, being on stage, I was like, I'm just concentrating on what the fucking chords are. I'm looking at their excitement. I'm, like, feeling this energy. And it's like you just feel like your skin's on fire the whole time. And it was fucking wild.
Yeah, and if you hit the pocket, especially because, you know, we were a pretty tight band.
Yes.
And so we were very into getting that. And if you hit the pocket where everybody's playing just right, and they're playing fast, and they're playing together, and the harmonies are on, it's like a little spiritual experience.
Yeah,
it's like touching, you know, something very deep within your own spirituality. I mean, I'm not really like a religious guy at all. That's the that's the closest thing I've come to when people talk about religious experience, because it's like it is. There was a Southern rock band that my brother still does some business with, who I love, called Driving and Crying, and they had this song called Powerhouse, and one of the lines is like he never knew the Lord until he hit a power chord, and I love that line because it's so true. Like if you hit a power chord, an electric guitar, and especially when you're like 17 years old, and a guy, I think maybe has something to do with it. I don't know, but probably the same thing for a girl. Like it just feels like you have some control over when you're of the universe, when in fact you have none, right? So It's an amazing feeling, and it's a lot of creativity comes out of that age group and time, because I think people are just filled with energy and just certainty about the world. I mean, there's some bad stuff to that, but it did change, and it was a little bit weird. I mean, like I told you, I think separately, I've thought about writing about this and interviewing people like you've done. How did we go from Bad Religion to Good Charlotte? No offense to any of the people on that list, but like it's just a totally different world by the end, and the scene ethics had changed so much. I mean, I don't think I can do it because I just don't know enough about what's going on today to really say what happened now. But like when we also lived through the birth of the internet. I mean, like I said, you said you were using it a roll camera, like one of those throwaways. Yeah. Like now when people are doing stuff, they have a full-on pocket computer, phone, everything in their pocket. That was like new at the time. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something, I mean, we had cell phones towards the end, but like we had like a beeper, I think, the first tour. Yeah.
Jeff beeper, calling cards, the dialers, map, like actual physical map. And we went to our first gas station before tour started. We're like, oh, pick up the map so we know where the fuck we're going on tour. We're like, okay.
Right. We need to get another atlas, for Colorado now.
Yeah.
Right. And you have like a library of atlases from your tours. Yeah. I mean, it's totally crazy. It's totally different. And we stayed at truck stops all the time. And like, that was the height of entertainment. You go in there and like, do gambling machines and whatever. It was just a crazy experience. We met lots of weird people, and there's a lot of weird people out there in the music world putting on shows, doing stuff from the just amazing people, and people that you're like, how the hell did I get here? And who is this person? Right. And should I get out because they seem like they're crazy? But that happens quite a bit.
That was quite a bit on tour. There would be did you guys used to do the thing where you'd be on stage, you'd start it off like, hey, we're Whippersnapper. We have no place to stay tonight, so if anyone could put us up, let us know after the show.
Yeah, that's happened. Yeah. And it led to some of the weirdest shit ever. And sometimes it was somebody putting on the show. I mean, we had this. So I do remember this.
Go on.
I have no idea where it was, but I do remember this one guy who put on the show, and he seemed very cool. But, it's fine. We're going to stay at his house. And we get to his house, and he's got like these two it's like he's got these two chicks who are like rubbing on him and on his legs. He's like sitting on this chair like it's a throne. And it becomes clear that he also sells drugs. And he's wasted. And he pulls out a gun and is like talking and waving the gun around while these chicks are like at his legs. I mean, it was like I'm like, am I dreaming? What the fuck is going on? This is crazy. And guys like, it's not, it was bizarre. And then there was another one where the girl put on the show. It was in Tahoe. We're at her apartment. I'm like looking around her apartment. She's kind of got like a goth thing going, and there's a lot of death heads around and shit. And then I noticed there's like an iron cross. And then I'm like looking through her records, and I find a record that's like Nazi sayings, marches, and chants. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Right. And then she's like getting drunk, and she pulls out this big jar of greenish fluid. And she's like, this is jungle juice, and you guys got to try it. My family made it for Satan Mass. I'm like, what? She's like, it's not really satanic. We're a bunch of bikers, and we go out into the desert, and you bring your bikes, and this is basically like just Everclear and a bunch of other stuff, and there's watermelon chunks in there. If you eat the watermelon chunks, you're gonna get real fucked up. So try it. So I'm like, I'm just like trying to see where all this is gonna go, because I was always that kind of person. And she's being hospitable, so I'm not gonna get in her face about anything. And so we drink, and she gets completely wasted, and she starts crying about her boyfriend and how girls are doing it on their own now. Look at Gwen Stefani, and like, her boyfriend is a bastard. He's doing all this stuff, and we're drunk, and so we're all like, yeah, what a bastard. And she pulls out a picture, and it's a full-on skinhead guy in front of fucking American flag. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck? and then she's like, everybody take your shirts off, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Let's see where this goes. And so I do it. Everybody does it, except for Mike Fink, who's like, got a girlfriend and is highly doubtful about this entire situation. Right?
Rightfully so.
Yeah, the whole thing is off. And then she comes over and is like, gets in Mike's face. What are you afraid of? Like the whole thing. And eventually she just passes out, and we're just like, we got to get the fuck out of here. This is crazy. Let's get out of here. So those kinds of things happen a lot. That was one night of thousands of nights where there was something crazy happening. And, that's just the road. The road brings out the weirdest of peoples. And it also always ends up, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol involved out there, so that, weird things happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but it makes you think, you're like, people just live like this normally. And
they did then. I don't know if it's the same now. I mean, I think things are a lot different now that everybody has visibility into everybody else's life all the time.
I think it's worse. I mean, it's more of a free. It's like, hey, there's, especially with visibility, they can utilize that. People can, especially really weird fucking people, they can utilize that to make a living off of it, or they can just be like, I want to express this. And I think it gets more people out there to be that fucking crazy, which is, it's like interesting. But I think just the mentally, I'm like, this is normal for you, where I'm thinking like, I'm a pretty normal guy. Like, yeah, I'm on tour, but also like, yeah, I'm drinking a lot of beer, but I'm not doing all these crazy drugs, and I'm not like worshiping the devil, or I'm not, just like, I don't know, like so many.
No, bands are crazy. I mean, bands are crazy guys. And
definitely.
And a lot of guys can have trouble, but I got to tell you, fans are way crazier than musicians.
Well, they don't have that. They need that outlet. Everyone needs an outlet. It's got to be something. And if you're not playing music, like music is one outlet, and there's all different. But some people who didn't have any kind of musical talent or whatever, they were the interesting ones to stay with, because they were trying to find their way to do that. And like inviting you over was kind of their way to be like, I can vicariously live through this, which I don't know how to play music for shit or sing, but I can like hang around you guys. But I'm also either really normal, or I'm really fucking weird.
But it's a really dangerous thing too, though, because like a lot of times it'd be cool when you hang out with people and it's totally fine. But if for some reason, and a totally legitimate reason, you couldn't do it because like you had to go to the next show or whatever, some people took offense and got weird about it.
Yeah.
Like there are people who got, I mean, it was like an insecurity thing, but it would basically be like, oh, I'm not cool enough. And it's like, no, we literally have like 6 hours to go to get to the next show, and we have to be there by like noon, and we got to go. We got to drive halfway tonight. Sorry, So it'd just be weird sometimes, the attitude that people would get about, whether, because at the time I think this maybe actually ties into the sort of previous scene ethics of rock stars and not rock stars and all that stuff. It was like there was also a bit of a scene police out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was a big thing about that, like, oh, what's punk rock and what's not punk rock, and that can be really stifling. I mean, I remember the first time, dude from Humble who went to do Midtown.
Gabe.
Yeah, Gabe. Man, Gabe was like a total scenester, and we had a conversation where he was like, yeah, I think there should be like a group of people that says what's punk and what's not, and I was like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Like that would be a terrible thing. In fact, there kind of is already, but I mean, putting that aside, I really wouldn't. That's not my word. The way I kind of like the idea of punk rock being a come and join it. If you're a weirdo, it's fine, and that punk rock is a sort of amorphous definition where like the Ramones are punk rock, but things that are completely not the Ramones are punk rock as well, right? And so, and you'll find every generation has their own definition since it became a thing of punk rock.
Well, it's like being open source, like open source, like code or something. Totally. It's like, you don't have to like regulate it, but you were going to say you remembered what?
No, it's the bug in the machine, dude. And it doesn't matter. Like I remember older dudes in the Athens music scene would listen to us and be like, you guys are really great and I love it, but it's not punk rock, dude. Punk rock is like the Clash.
Yeah.
You're not like the Clash at all in our view. And I'd be like, well, one, I love the Clash, right? The Clash are great. But we're faster. Sorry. Right. It's like, it's just, we're going to play faster.
Yeah.
And the Clash are a bit of a different animal, but like, I mean, look, we went and played the Holiday in the Suns Festival in London once, and we played right before the Exploited totally not our style.
Yeah.
I was thrilled to be playing right before The Exploited. Their fans hated us, totally fine. But the guy stole my cigarettes. I thought that was great. That's exactly what I want the guy from The Exploited to do, steal my cigarette. We also played with the Scatolites once, and their crowd hated us. But it was still part of our scene in our view. I mean, we kept pulling the Back to the Future line where we were like, well, you may not like this, but your kids are going to love it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so there's always different people have different views on what it is. And I'm sure right now, if I went out and found out what the kids in the deepest of underground think is punk rock, I'd be like, what? It's not punk rock.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like with this podcast is like I started it off to be like, this is when I thought it was like, this is when punk was. Like, granted, I do like a lot of bands now. I mean, even when the 2000s happened, when they came in, like when Take It Back Sunday came out, I've said this many times, like I fucking despise them. And then I got their first record and I was like, this is amazing. I absolutely love this band. And it opened the door. But then there was this fine line where I was like, when Brand New came out, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And Take It Back Sunday and all these bands. But then there was the ones where you're like, this is so contrived and bullshit. And I think it's crap because you're not doing it for the right reasons. But I think like, so there is that attitude where I've definitely become that with people, but I can recognize that. I'm like, wow, I'm that guy who said this isn't punk rock. This isn't the Clash, like, metaphorically.
I fucking let it all go, man. I mean, I do not care as long as it's good now. And there's so many things, but it's also hard for me. Like I go way back. I listen to a lot of instrumental music these days because lyrics and all that stuff can bother me sometimes if it's not done right, or at least not done right the way I like it. Yes. And also sometimes if I'm just writing or working, because I do a lot of writing in my work, I get distracted by words. Whereas I can groove with music, I can have that flow state you're talking about with animation or with art. With just listening to music in the background, I can use that to help me access that state. Whereas if there's words, I'm distracted by what the person's saying, their point of view, their story, whatever it is.
Oh, I can't. When I first started doing design work or back in the day, I used to be able to multitask and be able to do shit while I was listening to music and things like that. So if I'm designing, I can listen to, if I'm doing like a logo or whatever, I can listen to bands singing because it all meshes together. But if I am really trying to concentrate, I have to put on just like noise. Like there's this Spotify thing called Lush Lofi. It's like Lofi, and it's just this weird trance, techno just sounds with just like it's almost like it's like liquefied. It's weird, but just puts you in this mood of that's kind of creating that, like you said, that flow where the lyrics
I do that with like
just
math
throw me
rock,
off.
Battles and Trans Am and like Tom Caballero. It's a little heavy, but it still works. Just like math rock with no lyrics, and repetitive shit. But I love all that stuff. I like everything. I like surf music. I like country music. I like every kind of music now. At the time, I was a punk rocker. All I listened to was, I listened to metal, like I said, and I listened to some certain bands that I just thought were great, and the Beach Boys and some other weird stuff that just like an influence from when I was a kid. But I was mainly into punk rock. Now I'm kind of like a universalist when it comes to music.
Well, I think as you get older, it just kind of happens that way. I mean,
and a musician has to be that way. Musician has to be that way.
Well, it's like I think like back then, kind of, I'm gonna wrap this up here soon, but like, just like those people who. When the scene was like the Wild West when it started, but then there's certain mindsets that kind of say, I know how to take over this and it should be this way. And it was the thing we wanted to get away from in high school. It just that pops up in that crowd and someone in those ideals come up and they're like, oh, we should kind of conform and have our certain little groups. And it's like, this should be the hardcore kids. They should stay away from the ska kids or stay away from the punk kids. And like, then when that stuff started to form, you're kind of like, no, like that we should all be together and mesh. And there's been a couple
for sure.
Yeah, like Adam and his Package, I talked to him, or like Weston, and we've all talked to these bands, or like Piebald, I talked to Travis, and they're like, yeah, we could show up and just fit in those shows where it was a hardcore band, then a ska band, then us, which was just like nothing really defined. And people were like, oh, cool. This sounds like if I'm driving and I'm putting different CDs in or mixing in.
Yeah, I think the idea there was division there was a lot more psychological than true.
Yeah.
Like I said, we were in Atlanta. We were playing a scene. Kids would be there that would have their leather jacket with the pinned up, crass thing on it, and they would still come to the show. And they might like, oh man, I don't really like them, but they were at the fucking show. You know what I mean? Like they had their little scenes, but they also were part of one scene. And I think that it started out a lot more were all in the same thing and got more divided over time, because people want to differentiate themselves. And as it become more popular, as like, especially probably for the younger kids, as it became more that the people, a lot of times what punk rock is like the outsider kid who wants to differentiate himself from everybody and play something that turns a lot of people off, actually.
Yeah.
Because it makes him, you know what I'm saying?
But
and so like if everybody loves Green Day, then maybe Green Day isn't such a rebel thing anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But I did love though when the Liberty Spike kid or the super like I don't know, like like the real punk kid, or the ones that they didn't look like us. Like we would have the baggy clothes and the XL shirts, even though we weighed like 120 pounds, like,
right.
And the Van sneakers. But when the kids who didn't look like us came up to our band and they're like, that was fucking awesome, that was so exciting for me, because I felt like accepted. For some reason, I'm like, wow, like I thought you would only like your certain style of music because of what you dress, and that you were open-minded to like our shit. Like I loved that. It was always exciting to me when they said that. I was like, oh, I'm fucking cool.
Yeah, it's great when people are open, I mean, like that's the way they should be, especially in that kind of, the whole point of the scene to me was that it's accepting of all the misfits, regardless of how they didn't fit in. And it brought them together in a place to say, look, we're the cool kids. You guys think that you're cool, but we're the ones who know about this really awesome thing and have tapped into this amazing thing together, and you don't know about it. It's not yours.
Yeah. And stay away. I can imagine too that the people listening to this, there's like the listener base is starting to really grow with this thing. So I can imagine who out there is listening who used to dress with all the Liberty Spikes, or be the turtleneck emo kid, or the super hardcore kid who now they're just dressed like an older person. It's just like, I still dress pretty much the fucking same as I did back then, which was just, casual. Like I didn't have to like go all crazy, but now just like any of those people are wearing, some business attire and, have this big family, and they're like, yeah, I remember those days, but I'm not like that anymore. I'm like that at heart, but I don't dress that way.
Right. My tattoos are on the inside.
Yeah. I hide them. As I get one the other day, like on my forearm, that's like of my comic. It just says, this is a tattoo. Like, nice. I'm like, I don't want to get rid of it. All right. A couple things before we wrap this up. How'd you guys officially break up?
So how did we officially break up? Well, like I said, there was a bunch of inner dissension about who's going to write and what's going to happen, royalties that didn't exist and all that stuff. And it started to, in my view, affect the writing. Like we weren't getting stuff done. And we were getting a little bit older, and I was like, look, I'm not sure I want to be doing this when I'm in my mid 30s. Like, I'm not sure that this is the right, the touring life is like the most appealing life in the world to an 18 to 22-year-old dude.
Yeah.
But as you get past that and you're like 25, you're like, is this really going to be a great life or not? And so I just got to a point where I was like, I'm not sure I really want to rely on other people, whether it's labels or the dudes in the band or whatever, and the music's being affected. And I just think that, it's time to try something different. And so I came to the guys and said, look, I'm not really, it feels like everybody's, kind of pulling apart a little bit. And I just think we should call it a day, because it's not working out the way we want it to. And I'm not sure I really want to do this forever, and when I said that, I think a lot of people, it rang true with peak guys in the band who were like, sort of, yeah, I agree. Although not everybody. I mean, I think that Pat and Jason were pretty lost for a little bit
afterwards.
Yeah, because they weren't sure what to do. Pat immediately went and kept doing the music business, as did I, from like tour management and management side. Jason, I think, was a little bit lost and maybe lost for many years, and kind of trying to figure out what the fuck it was he was supposed to do with his life. Because he was like the thing is, like, Pat was an amazing drummer. He could have been a professional drummer for the rest of his life, but he found other things that he loved, and he does them. He's a pilot now. He fucking loves it.
Easy.
Yeah, I mean, he always loved that. By the way, that's not some new shit he came up with. Like, he grew up with, his father was a pilot. He knew, and he grew up flying planes and dealing with planes, so he loved that kind of stuff. And so it just, I think people went off and did their thing, and they realized it was probably for the best, and that was an amazing time in our lives. But better to switch course now and find other things that would satisfy us, because it wasn't going to be we had a great run, but it wasn't going to be, we weren't going to be a huge band who made it. It just wasn't going to be that way for us. So
were you guys actually, wait, this one real quick, were you guys actually like making any money off the band to pay bills at that point?
No, I mean, we had, we did okay throughout in sort of having the band partially support what we were doing. I think everybody still had side gigs just because they wanted more money than was available. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, we were full-time musicians. That's what we were doing. I mean, we had records out. We were touring all the time, and but we had side gigs when necessary, and I think that was also a thing. It's like, if it's not gonna fully, because I mean, with the other thing that people don't realize is 5 guys in a band, even when you're doing pretty well, when you got to split it all 5 ways, it's not a lot of money.
No.
And of course, everything was getting harder. I mean, like, now it's all about touring, and then touring was very important as well, and so was merch. But like, records still made some money. Records don't make money for people now,
no,
unless you make a ton. Even when you sell a ton or stream a ton, it's not a ton of money, these days. That's why the music business is in peril. It's all, the Napster guy broke it a long time ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was also that the whole entire industry was kind of fucked up, and do we really want to deal with this for the rest of your life too?
Yeah.
So basically, we all got together. We mutually agreed that this was the right thing to do, and called the label. They were not happy, believe me, because we still had a couple records left on the deal with Fuel by Ramen.
Yeah.
But they were like, they were kind of pissed. They were like, why, we made a record. Because usually what it works with the record is, the first record is where you make a loss, and the second record is where you make some money. Even with an established band, when you bring them over, because you have to like plug them into your people. And we didn't do the second record. We just did the first one. So it was really sad. I mean, I remember I went out, I took a bottle of Jack Daniels. I went and sat on a rock by a river in Athens and got wasted and thinking about it and cried and made a decision,
Yeah.
And then I moved on, because that's what I do. I just I make decisions and I move on. So.
And you went back to school?
I went back to school. I went through undergrad like fast, did like 3-year undergrad. I loved it. I was like, people around me who were like bitching about college, I was like, are you kidding me? This is like a paradise.
Yeah.
Basically sit around and think all day, read books, and talk with people who are experts in whatever it is that you're talking about. So I loved it, and I really, and I was older. So, and I had been on tour for the last, I don't know what, I went when I was 25. So I've been on the tour for the last 6 years. And so I no longer needed to go out and get wasted or chase girls. I just basically like actually buckled down and paid attention, because I was into it. And to me, it was like, I'm paying for that. I had to pay for it out of pocket. My parents, all that stuff had flown.
Yeah.
Any support had had already passed. So, and I enjoyed it. So I did that. And then I ended up going to law school after that.
Oh,
for
really?
3 years.
Jesus.
Yeah, I went right to law school, and so I got through undergrad and law school in 6 years, and then and I'm an attorney and do all kinds of crazy. I mean, I do huge cases and whatever. It's just a little bit weird. It's not what I would expect my life to turn out to do, but I'm doing really big things, and it's interesting intellectually. But I miss, and there's some creativity to it, believe me, on the writing side and whatnot. But I do miss the creativity of being a musician.
I had no idea you were a lawyer.
Yeah, it's totally crazy. It's not what most people would have predicted. Although if people knew me and they knew how much I loved to argue back in the day, they would have known. I was a big arguer,
This makes sense why you're not that much on Facebook. Usually people with jobs like that are kind of like, yeah, I keep it low profile.
Yeah, that's partly I hate social media, and partly I can't say what I'm doing, because it would be a breach of like certain obligations of confidentiality. I can't be like, hey, I'm in Hong Kong. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not a good look if you're in the middle of a case and the person's like, oh no, they're in Hong Kong. Send somebody over there and deal with the documents or whatever the hell it is we're doing. So I have to be more circumspect. Plus, I just hate social media. I think that first off, it's made high school reunions completely obsolete. What's the point? Right?
Yeah.
And secondly, I think it makes it where people don't communicate enough, because they think you already know.
Yes.
So like when I talk to people I haven't talked to in a long time, whether from the scene or just old friends, I'll be like, so what's going on, man? How are you doing? Did you get married? They're like, what's all, don't you follow me on Facebook? Don't you know I've had 3 kids? No, I don't, because I'm busy, and because, if you want me to know, you should tell me. I'm not watching your channel. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. And I'm watching
Um,
the whatever show.
right.
Yeah,
It's just a little bit weird, and I also feel like, maybe it's changed a little bit now, and people are more authentic on there. But I do feel like it's definitely, here's a shell. Here's the marketing of who I want you to think I am.
right.
You know what I mean? And so I have some stuff. I mean, I have those accounts and whatnot. I just don't spend much time doing with them. And frankly, it's probably mainly because I'm busy, and especially now, I have a 18-month-old kid now, and so I'm really busy.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's awesome, and I'm teaching her how to, all about music, and she has a little T-shirt that says I listen to punk rock with my daddy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. Yeah, it's the social media thing. It's like I feel like I'm so on the opposite side of the spectrum just because I utilize it to promote a lot of stuff, but I also try to be as open as much as possible and like give people, like my buddy Tom, who's we did a Q&A a couple episodes ago. He says it best. He's like, everyone on Facebook, they see the A sides, but no one gets to see the B sides. And
Right.
I was like, I love that so much. And I feel like when I'm posting things or doing things, it's like, one, I utilize it. I'm on it because of this podcast, and I have like my webcomic, and I've got my animation thing, and then I do like the Lane Meyer thing, which is really funny now because it's like 20 years later, but I have such a blast. Like, here's us with Whippersnapper, and I so want to be like, here's Chris and Heiner just completely naked on the bus, but Chris is like this top exec at this like certain job. He's like, dude, do not post any of that shit.
Right. I hear you. I mean, that's there's a lot of crazy stuff about like what can we really talk about happened, because
Yeah.
who knows in this world what's acceptable anymore. But yeah, I mean, dude, I look back on it with a lot of love and nostalgia, and sometimes some sadness about how things went. We should have done this or that or whatever. But that's just life, man.
Yeah.
And it's the way you go through it. And I think that, I mean, there is a it's quasi Whippersnapper song out there that never got released that me and Jason did a few years ago. That this English guy wanted to release, but we couldn't get everybody to agree that we would put it out, so we didn't put it out. But I think Jason and I are going to maybe do some, playing around with some Pro Tools stuff this year and see if we can put some songs together. I just miss the writing. I don't care if anybody hears it.
Yeah.
It's an introspective process that allows you to really like. And for you on the social media, it's the same thing with social media. Like for you, it makes sense. Creatives, it's a perfect place to do marketing.
Oh, it's great.
What I mean? It's a perfect place to do it.
And it's also, if you do it well, though, if you do it, like I said, like I was trying to say, like the authentic, you keep it authentic and you do the B-sides with it. Like you treat it as what it is. It's a bullshit facade. But if you add that, I'll add vulnerability to it just because I wanted to make it personable. But then, if I didn't have that, I'd be like, I would not have Instagram on my fucking phone. I would get all that shit off. But it is fun though, because I'm like, oh, this is really fun as someone who I like to create all the time, and I have so many different avenues. I could be in the moment and see something funny and do an Instagram story, and I'm like, huh, that was funny to me, and I just put it out there, and it's gonna be deleted in like 24 hours. But there's something to these where I see the benefit of it, and other people make it like run their life where they get sad all the time.
Right. I don't want to shut it down, and I think there's a possible way to use it that's good. But I think there's a lot of people for which it is a very bad thing and a negative thing in their life. And I don't know how to deal with it. I'm going to have to figure out how to navigate it with a daughter. Yeah. It's scary. It's really scary. I mean, I'm afraid to put her pictures up now because of the kind of weirdos that are out there. I don't know what I'm going to do when she's a little, 12, 13-year-old girl and is on whatever the current, 3D media is at the time or whatever.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very interesting future. We're going to see a lot of stuff. I mean, we're the turn of the century people. That's the weird thing about everything. We don't think about it that way because we're in the midst of it. But at least, especially for me, I mean, when I was in high school, AOL was a brand new thing. and before that, the biggest thing you could have in high school was basically a beeper. You know what I mean? That was a cool thing to have. And of course, everybody whispered that you might be a drug dealer.
Yeah. Or you have your own line to your bedroom. You're like, you have your own line?
You have your own. And the telephone was connected to the wall. I actually have nostalgia for the days when you couldn't be reached. Yeah. You were doing something and people could not bother you. That's a great thing.
Yeah. That's a good
Now
point.
Everybody can get you all the time. It's actually even worse for a work world. And the work world is now 24/7 once you're past the hourly world. When you're in the salary world, people expect to have you, access to you at any time.
Yeah, that's
because
crazy.
of the way the technology is.
Yeah, I
You
told
know?
my buddy. My buddy was he was doing work on a Saturday. I go, bro, you're a salaried employee. He was like, yeah, that means I work all the time. I go, fuck that, man. I'm like, you are 9 to 5. That's what you pay you for. I was like, I know you're obviously thinking differently because you're salary. Like to him, I was like, you're a salaried employee, and he also kind of enjoys it too. But I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, once it's Friday, like sometimes it'll be Friday at like 2 o'clock, and since I work more for myself, I'm like, I'm done. I'll be back at Monday morning. Don't fucking contact me.
No,
Like,
it's a beautiful thing if you can do it, man. I
yeah.
mean, I think
It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. It's like, financially, it's not easy. But that's the freedom, where the money's not made, the freedom's there to make up for it.
yeah, it's all a big balance. I mean, I think one day I'll get out of mine's a little bit. My job's a bit demanding
Oh yeah,
these days. But I think
I would
that
say.
as I progress on, I'll come up with a plan to put myself into a more flexible situation. It's just for now, I'm engaged and I like what I'm doing.
Yeah,
It's
no,
a
it's
little
great.
crazy. It's interesting to do though.
If you love it, as long as you love it, I don't care what. If you're like, I do this all the time, I'm totally supportive. I'm give a shit if you're like, I work 100 hours a week, but I love it. It's like that's all I just want people to do.
Yeah.
And when they're really bummed about it, then it's like, well, how do you get it? Then you should get out of it, but don't feel like you're trapped.
Yeah, life's too short to stay in a job you hate. That's for sure.
Yeah, because it's like when you're dead, like you're not going to take your fucking benefits with you. So it's like,
Exactly.
cool, man. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. One thing I do want to say though, I think I've told you this even back on tour, but "Blinded," that is like that's like my favorite Whippersnapper song. I
Nice.
love that song so much, and yeah, I just had to have that up because I am. Yeah, I brought it up earlier. I think I had a question about it. I think it was like what the song was about, but actually, yeah, what is the song about? Fuck it.
Oh man, blinded. So a lot of times songs were like little mini messages to people who I knew who were going through something. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that I love that song for its rhythm and everything. I think it had an amazing groove to it. I really like that. But I think with that song, I was just thought there were certain people around me um, who thought they understood what was going on in the world and thought that they had this vision for things, right?
Hmm.
But it made them unable to really connect with people because they just couldn't see past their own views. You know what I mean? They were blinded by their vision, blah blah blah, blinded by sight. Like they were blinded by what they thought the truth was, and they just they couldn't connect with
Yeah.
anybody because of that. And so, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at it again because I'm sure there may be something more specific I was thinking about at the time, and I haven't heard that song frankly in 10 years.
Yeah.
you know, but it was almost every song had to do with specific people in my life who I was kind of making a mini analysis of a lot.
Yeah, I thought it
Unfortunately,
was such a perfect song because I liked that you were talking to someone specific about something. You were like, this is something you need to fix. But like there was little touches in there where I don't know if it was like Mike or Jason where it was like I forget the lyrics. It was like there would be that little guitar riff. It was like bow now, bow now, and just like that little
yeah,
slide that was going on, and then like the
yes,
chorus, like the late the night. It was just like, oh, this is such a good fucking song. It was so catchy. But
yeah.
yes, it's a very good job on that one.
Well, thanks, I appreciate it.
20
Yeah,
years later.
I appreciate that 20 years later. I appreciate it. That was a big one for me, man. That was actually one of the first songs we wrote for that record. So it set the tone for a lot of what was on the record.
Yeah, I thought that was like that was the like the hit. I thought off of that record,
Yeah,
even though
cool.
it's all the way. I think it was number 5. Yeah, the number 5 is usually a good spot for like.
Yeah, you got to ban cleanup, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so before we go, 2 questions. What would you like to promote? And it could be you personally, or you can give a shout out to someone doing something that you want to bring attention to.
I got nothing to promote these days. I mean, I think that people should just find what they love and do their thing. I'm not selling anything, and I
Okay.
don't know anybody who's selling anything that would be, the appropriate for here.
You don't want
So
anybody to take a
nothing.
flight. You don't want anybody to take a flight on Pat's airline or.
Well, no, I think he does private stuff for a company, but I think I would say this podcast is worth checking. If you're only listening to this one for the first time, go back to the other ones because I've been doing it, and if you were around then, it's pretty amazing to hear, to go back and listen to people who you either liked their music or who you actually knew. I mean, half the people you interviewed, I knew. I played with, or I put a show on for.
Yeah,
you know,
awesome.
Or more than half, probably 99%.
Well, I appreciate the plug in your plugging.
Yeah.
All right, so last question you've heard many times. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
So I'd say anti-authoritarianism. Basically, like I've always had a problem with people trying to assert authority too hard and just deferring to that. I think it's probably one of the reasons why I also became a lawyer, because you can kind of stand up to that as a lawyer within the confines of the system itself, which is a little bit weird. If you follow me.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of question authority and question sort of the status quo premise, I still hold on to that.